Hi, everybody. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm talking to you. This is April 20th, 2024, and we're here to discuss Vedic astrology, how it can look at things, predict things, and I'll give you a basic orientation to Vedic astrology as part of this particular broadcast. So some of you may already know what Vedic astrology is, what it consists of. Some of you don't. So Vedic astrology, like any astrology, tries to assess patterns in life or patterns of the mind. So again, there's a large psychological bias in astrology, of course, but patterns of the mind and how they essentially reflect our environment and also our the circumstances of the world around us. So I think one of the most interesting things about astrology is that it is, some people view it as being a predestination instrument or an instrument of fate. Other people view it as being an instrument of fate and choice. Or some people just use it as an instrument of choice. I fall somewhere in the middle because I think certain things in life you cannot avoid. Those are essentially hardwired into your physiology. So I was born in this particular place, in this particular environment. And while I do have some mobility to change location or to change career, there are certain things that I'm more drawn to, certain things I'm less drawn to. And those are either a result of my parents, who I can't change. Although we may try to change our parents, we can't change our parents. We can't change who our parents are. And there are certain physiological traits we inherit from our parents, and also certain psychological traits. That's very true. And those things affect the mind, they affect the psyche of the person. Also, there are economic situations you're born into. And again, those are things that you can or perhaps can't make your way out of. Certain illnesses we're born with, or certain illnesses we acquire, that are either seen as tendencies, but and there are certain illnesses that you just can't shake. And one of the reasons I'm saying that is because I was born with a neurological disorder, which is essentially, at least at this stage of science, it's manageable but incurable. So I can't eliminate it. They don't know how to eliminate it. So I think one of the things is, so I was born at the wrong time to have this particular condition eliminated. Or I was born at the right time in order to push me in certain directions to do what I do, to undertake what I undertake. And I did have a variety of choices in which direction I moved. As you get older, even then, you still have choices. You still have choices you can make in life. Okay. So there are different levels of karma in Vedic astrology. And for the sake of the audience, I'll just say there are karmas that come as a result of being born into the world, karmas that have accumulated from the past, karmas or actions that we undertake in our day-to-day lives, and also karmas we can do to essentially modify or change the future. So I think that there is a range of choice. I would never be so bold as to say uh, that you can't change your circumstances. Certain things about myself, perhaps I could change, but the effort would probably be too much, or I really don't want to make those changes. Okay. So let's say, um, let's say I want to get uh, an operation which would split my tongue in two. So I would have independent muscle control of my tongue. I've seen those done. I'm not particularly interested in doing that. You know, it's not one of my life goals. Do I have the choice? Can I do it? Yeah. Am I going to do it? No, it's not really something that interests me, so I'm not going to put any energy in that particular direction. Certain other things I want to do, and I may have limited talent in those areas, but I'll do them anyway. So, so let's say I will try to study different things, try to learn different things. Some may be successful, some may not. Some I'll be able to make money from, some I won't. Uh, and and that's fine. That's part of the learning process. So whenever anybody says to you that these things are destined to happen, certain things in the chart are overwhelmingly strong. Okay, they're not. Um, they're predestined in that they're physically bound. Okay, they're physically bound, and it takes a great deal of effort or expense to overcome them. Or else there's other things which you can change by just maybe shifting, to use one of my teachers' expressions, shifting the steering or the rudder of the boat so that it's tough to change the rudder of the boat. But if I change it now, I can avoid hitting an island in 10 years. You know, so let's say something like cigarette smoking, if I'm young, would be something like that. You know, so I choose not to smoke cigarettes when I'm young, there'll be less chance I'll be exposed to certain types of cancers. Okay. So those are like concrete examples I can give you. There are certain things, let's say if I studied business when I was an undergraduate rather than later on, I could have had a more financially lucrative lifetime, but I wasn't interested in business at that particular point in my life. I became interested in it in my late 20s. So I think one of the things you have to, and these are astrologically determined based upon the major planetary periods that you're involved in. And certain charts will have these tendencies kind of mapped out as to where your attention will be focused. So you may want to look at certain things at certain points in your life based upon your interests, and your chart's going to say, no, look over here. This is more important. Okay. So that's sort of like a way of explaining the difference between the things you have control over and the things you don't have control over. There's not, it's not quite so fatalistic. Chart patterns, especially future chart patterns, unless they're really, I had the misfortune or the fortune earlier this week to look at a person's chart who had an uncertain, who had an unfortunate turn of events, let me put it that way. And the chart was really, really strongly directed in that particular direction. So I'm not saying who it was, or, you know, so I'm not giving up any identity. And I think it was one of those things when I looked at the chart, I went like, only a slight chance of escaping this, you know, only a very, very slight chance. And As a matter of fact, everything was weighted against the person, pretty much. There have been times when I've seen things that have happened which have just been like, well, that was stupid. Why did you do that? You know, I'm not trying to talk down to anybody, but that's basically was my perception. And I think that those are the kinds of things, you know, so it's tough to break a habit. Anybody who's quit smoking or who's quit a habit knows it's tough to break a habit. Okay, so those habits are what get reinforced. These are proclivities in our chart, or tendencies in our chart. And we really have to work hard so we can avoid pain or disruption or uh, things like that. So I think that one of the keys to looking at in a chart is whether or not you have a choice, whether or not you've done some past actions, and whether or not you can make up for those and lead a more peaceful or a calm life or a more exciting life. It depends on what you need to fulfill in this lifetime, or you feel you need to fulfill in this lifetime. There are certain things which are unavoidable. That having been said, I teach Vedic astrology, I do readings, I can analyze these things for you, I can provide remedies. There are some certain mantras and certain gemstones which can help strengthen weak planets or weaken negative energy in a chart, and that's part of the Vedic tradition as well. So, if you're interested, please contact me at 508-525-0001 or at Gary Gomes at Gmail. I'm sorry, Gary Gomes, GaryGomes, the letter G, at gmail.com. Okay. So I think, all right. So again, the quickest way to contact me is by phone number 508-525-0001. And you can text me at that number too. You can find me on Facebook and on Instagram, and on Twitter, but basically those are far easier ways to contact me. The phone number is a far easier way to contact me. All right, so let's go on to this week's presentation. So I just wanted to give you that background. And I thought we might look at Israel's chart just for a few seconds because we looked at Iran's chart last week. And let's see now. So let me just see if I can get the share back. There we go. All right, so I looked at Israel's chart in previous broadcasts, but I think this is as good a time as any to look at it. Now, if you look carefully at this chart, I'm going to show the signs. Charts and options for select a chart. And I'm going to put the signs in there. One second. And I'm going to add something else as well, which is kind of something I've been experimenting with lately, which is, and those are called Graha Aradas. So let me just get this back up. So southeast, Ganesha center. House numbers. I want sign names. Rats. So easily yesterday. Right, so it's not showing up. Options for the chart. That's probably where it is. And no, it isn't showing up. All right. So let me just go on. I would do that. I'm going to do the Graha rulers. This is kind of an interesting concept. So essentially, what a Graha Aruda is essentially it's a representation of where the energy of the planet in the chart rests, or where it throws a shadow or an influence. Okay, and so this is different from, I think, from what some Vedic astrologers will tell you. But basically, you have this in this birth chart, Israel's birth chart. It has a Virgo rising. The Lord of Virgo is Mercury. It's in the ninth house. So that will actually give it a fair degree of luck in the chart. Okay, that's actually quite lucky for this particular sign. There's also what's called an exchange of lords between Mercury and Venus in the chart. So Mercury's in Venus's sign, and Venus is in Mercury's sign, which is called the Parivarna Yoga, and it's between the ninth and the 10th house. So in essence, it means that Israel will generally be lucky in its actions in the world. Sun's kind of weak, actually. It's in the ninth house, but it's kind of weak. So it has what I would call overcompensation issues. If the sun is weak, there's always a fight for survival in a chart. And also, Venus in the 10th house, it's a relatively prosperous country. You know, Venus and Mercury exchanging signs. The moon is in its own sign in the 11th house of friends and gains, but it's along with Saturn. So it has this kind of a traditional societal outlook, but it's also a very mixed society. Venus with Gemini indicates it can tolerate a variety of different cultures. I'm not trying to paint Israel as being glorious. Every state has its flaws. And Saturn aspects the first house. So there's a certain, when Saturn aspects the first house, essentially it can damage the intelligence or even the luck of a nation or a person. It doesn't necessarily mean the person's going to have nothing but bad luck, but they'll have to fight for everything they get. And they'll make some really bad decisions. If we have this Saturn, and let's see where the sixth house, Lord, sixth house is the house of enemies. So it has the combination of friends becoming enemies and enemies becoming friends, very, very obviously in this chart. And one of the things that's happening, and let's look at where all the other primary planets are placed. Jupiter's in the third house, retrograde, so it's very strong. Jupiter rules the seventh house of allies. But Jupiter's in a very warlike sign. Jupiter's in Mula Nakshatra, so it's really not going to be what I would call um, peacefully inclined. His birth was rather disruptive to the area in which it was founded. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be there or they should be there. I'm just saying it was disruptive. Um, and Jupiter overall, and the other two prominent planets we have are Rahu and Ketu. And Rahu and Ketu are in opposing signs, as they always are. Rahu's in Aries, Ketu's in Libra. So some difficulty with alliances with Ketu's in Libra. Now, one thing I find fascinating about Israel in terms of the current transits that and how they're affecting it is that right now Saturn and Mars are in the eighth house, are in the eighth house from the moon. And that's a particular kind of a transit called an Ashtami Shani. And the Ashtami is one of the three main Saturn transits, destructive Saturn transits. So that doesn't mean that Israel's going to be destroyed. It does, however, mean there are going to be challenges to its survival over the next couple of years. It does mean it's going to have to fight a lot of people over the next few years. And the one planet I think I left out was Mars. I didn't put Mars in the chart. So Mars is in the 12th house. This is Mars in Leo is supposed to cancel Mars affliction, but this does give it what I would call dubious partnerships. So right now, Saturn is in Aquarius, which is a sign connected with change, or not necessarily overthrow, but change or reform. So the next couple of years of Israel will be connected very strongly with reform. Right now, Mars is in the same sign with Saturn. It won't be there for very long, but that also gives it involvement in a war, basically, or involvement in conflict. And if you look at this chart, also you'll see allies turn on it. So traditionally, the United States has been a strong ally of Israel. So has most of Western Europe. We're seeing trends which, again, sort of fits with Saturn and Aquarius. So we really don't need Uranus is in this sign right now. It's in Taurus. So this is Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Aquarius. And if you see over here, K2 is kind of a disruptive influence on this sign. And its partnerships will always realign with its partnerships. But right now, there is some confusion because of the lunar eclipse as to who Israel's partners or allies are. It can also give them some bad judgment. So I'm not saying that Israel is blameless in what's going on right now. Far from it. The Saturn-Mars aspect will tend to activate aggression. It will tend to activate it will tend to react rather aggressively. And I think in the case of what happened with Iran, provocatively. So, and one thing I was wrong about in terms of the 300 missiles that were shot from Iran, they were armed at Israeli military bases, from what I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. So they weren't involved as civilians. Now, in any fire attempt, there's a danger of taking out civilian populations. And that was what happened. Essentially, Israel did not attack Iran directly, but they hit its consulate, which is viewed as being Iranian soil. So I think there is plenty of stupidity to go around on both sides. By international law, I believe that Iran could attack, but should they have attacked? I really don't think that was the best idea, because it essentially escalated the concept or the activity, and it gives the Israelis a chance to strike back, and or an argument that they can strike back. Again, there's a longer history involved in this current conflict than I feel qualified to discuss. What I'm looking at right now is this Moon, Saturn, Mars, Rahu subperiod. So this will make Israel, whoops, I'm in the wrong time. So let's go ahead. So right now we're in a Rahu, Saturn, Jupiter, Sun subperiod. My apologies. And so Rahu is essentially it wants what it wants when it wants it. So Israel's in a and Rahu's like Saturn, so it's a little bit, it can act a little bit stupidly, okay? But they were attacked. I mean, I'm not going to, I can't sugarcoat that. They were attacked on October 7th. Is the reaction that they're undertaking wise, given the fact that this is a Saturn subperiod? No. After April 27th, there's not really indications that things will get much better, because we'll be in a Mercury subperiod. Mercury will be luckier for Israel, but the problem is Mercury, and I'm going to show you a transit chart right now, and we'll move on to the transit chart. Mercury is in, there you go, plus transit. No, I don't want to do that. Okay, plus transit. All right, so this will give a transit chart for my time. You can see right here that essentially Mars is in this particular sign, but Rahu is over here with Venus and a debilitated Mercury. So communications are going to be stifled. They're going to be incredibly confused. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a few seconds. But basically, what's happening right now is there's a lot of confusion communicationally, and I don't really think this conflict will be over really until around September, optimistically. So hopefully it won't run into several years of activity, and hopefully it'll be done sooner than this. But I think there's going to be some very stupid mistakes made in the summertime by Israel in terms of relations with other countries, and maybe even an upset in the government, because that's essentially the general trend around the world right now. But also Israel's entering a shaky time after the end of May in terms of the stability of its government. So if we look at this chart right now, so let's shift gears and look at what's happening right now all around us. So as I'm talking to you right now, the rising sign is Cancer. The moon is in Virgo along with Ketu. And so I almost had a virus attack this morning, which is interesting on my computer. And let's see now. So Ketu rules viruses, just in case you didn't know. And the moon is a little bit confused, but one of the things that's even more confusing is that we got subjected to what I would call a lot of, like an immense level of exposure of propagandizing, but also a large level of just more intensive propagandizing over the past week or so. Okay, so this isn't just applying to Israel, or isn't just applying to the United States or the trials or the elections or anything like that. This is globally, okay? And one of the reasons for that is because Mercury's so trashed right now. Mercury as a planet is really, really disruptive. And K2 with the moon makes it easier for people to get confused or to get upset or to get anguish. And Venus with Rahu essentially makes it okay for people to feel selfish. Now, the Sun and Jupiter are together. That particular combination is relatively good. The Sun and Jupiter are well placed in the 10th house. So that will give governments more power or more push to do whatever they like. Saturn's aspecting that Jupiter, a Sun-Jupiter combination, and what have I said for months? That makes governments stupid. Okay, it also exposes them when they do overstep their bounds. We had in the United States, excuse me, just recently we had a scandal of sorts come out over NPR, National Public Radio, or National Public Television too. And that is, there was one of the correspondents who had been there for years, and essentially I think he was planning to retire, which is why he wrote the op-ed anyway, or wrote the piece anyway, said that essentially NPR was biased. And all these speeches came out by the woman who was appointed to be the in charge of NPR. And she was talking about a variety of truths. Now, I'm not a linguistics expert, but I think one thing is there's kind of a failure for people to distinguish truths and facts from perspectives, okay? So, and as we called them as one of my colleagues called them when I was in my doctoral program, filters, okay? So certain things did happen, okay? Certain things happen in history. And history is not objective truth. So just keep that in mind. History is one country or one person's telling of a story, telling of a series of events. And their perspective may differ from your perspective immensely, depending on who writes the story, who looks at it. It's almost, history is essentially news, but from a long time ago, okay? And I think one of the things we're getting confused is we're getting perspective confused with truth. So you can look at a series of events like, let's say, oh gosh, World War I occurred. Okay, we had a World War I. I'm trying to make it as uncontroversial as I possibly can. How you viewed World War I, or how you viewed what happened during that war, or how you viewed the war while it was in progress would vary wildly depending on which side you were on, or if you were not involved with it at all. Those are perspectives. Those are not truths. Okay. Perspectives are individualized. Truth is essentially fact. Okay. So there are no such thing as alternative facts. That is true. There are such things as alternative perspectives. And that's what I always advise people to do when they're looking at any situation, is to try to keep an open mind as to how another person may be viewing this. So I think that one thing that's happened over the past 30 to 60 years is politically, we've tended to look at our perspective of facts, our perspective of events as being the truth of those events. The truth of those events lies in activities, numbers, essentially what really happened, okay? The perspective is driven by a set of very prejudiced eyes. And I'm deliberately using the word prejudiced or eyes judged by our own experience or what we've learned. So I'm cautioning folks to look at the current environment not based upon what you think is good or bad, or who's the hero or who's the villain, but what the facts are. And to try to weigh those things based upon, because we've been told things throughout our entire lives as objective truths, which aren't objective truths. And to a lesser or greater extent, we've all been propagandized. So it takes work, like I said before, like I was saying before, it takes work to separate the wheat from the chaff. And I think that's what the next couple of months are going to be about in very large form. So overall, if we're looking at, let's say, election data or data on trials or data on different governments, so let's say the Argentinian government is viewed as being a right-wing dictatorship by some people. It's really not. The current Argentinian government really isn't. The current, it's always more complicated than that, and that's going to be even more so than the economy, which I do think is heading a bit south. I hope I'm wrong about that. A bit south in as Jupiter hits. So Jupiter's only a few weeks away from moving into Taurus, and Mars is only a matter of a couple of weeks before it moves into this sign, and Mars will be in conjunction with Mercury, which will be going direct. But again, it's going to be an extravaganza of lies. I mean, I really can't emphasize that enough. And there'll be big whopping lies. Okay, not small ones, big whopping lies. So basically, no new deals. Small purchases for yourself, fine. Small purchases for yourself, fine. If you get a contract opportunity, check it out a few different times. If you get any kind of activity like that, check it out a few different times. Just because there's a lot of potential for misrepresentation in this chart. Now, I spent a lot more time on Israel than I intended to, and a lot more time than I intended to on explaining the chart. So let me just run through the signs. The major thing that Aries will have to watch out for this week is for mistaking its full speed ahead kind of attitude and making a lot of stupid purchases because of that and going after some rather stupid things. Now, this doesn't mean that everything that this week that Aries does will be stupid, but it'll be a very strong potential for accidents and for also misjudging people. So just be a little careful about that. So in terms of health, be careful about health as well, and also about expenses. For Taurus, Taurus has Venus in the 12th house, good for financial gains, but again, spending too much on friends, maybe friends being a little bit famous, but a little bit deceptive, and also to children being a little bit moody or difficult to deal with. Those are the primary things I see for Taurus. Good week for career, though. For Gemini, Gemini has Mercury in the 10th house, so you'll be involved in a lot of different things, a lot of activities, maybe panicking a little bit too much about what could go wrong career-wise and business-wise. And again, feeling a little bit depressed or a little bit down, especially because of home matters or relationship matters. That'll pass relatively quickly. And let's see now. For Cancer, Cancer has Moon in the 3rd house along with K2. Cancer shouldn't make any major decisions over the next couple of days at least until Wednesday. And also, given this presence, it might do well to have some financial gains, but it'll also be prone to spend money much too quickly. Mars is in the 8th house along with Saturn. We've already spoken about that a little bit today, but be careful about accidents or injuries over the next couple of weeks. For Leo, Leo has Mars and Saturn in the 7th, K2 and Moon in the 2nd house, and Venus in the 8th. So there will be some influxes of money, but also, again, this tendency to perhaps trust in this authority too much. It'll be kind of pompous this week and kind of pushy, and also be a little bit wasteful with money. With Virgo, Virgo has K2 and Moon, very intuitive. It'll link up with friends a lot. And with Mercury in the 7th house, it won't have the best judgment in relationship life. And with Mars and Saturn, there is a tendency towards accidents or health issues. For Libra, Libra has Venus in the 6th house, exalted. That's generally good. It'll help this sign get a lot of work. Sun and Jupiter are in the 7th house. It'll open up new relationships and new opportunities. But again, there'll be a tendency to do everything a little bit too slowly and maybe overreach a little bit too much. Not hazardous, but just not really a good time for new business partnerships. For Scorpio, Scorpio has Mars and Saturn in the 4th house, aspecting the 1st, so the sign will feel like it has a lot of pressure. Venus and Mercury are in the 1st house. Venus and Mercury are in the 5th house. That's actually not a bad placement. Mercury's not really the best sign for this planet for this sign. And I think what you'll see is it'll end up ignoring a lot of enemies or ignoring a lot of people who want it to do stupid things. But Venus in the 5th, there'll be this kind of like impetuousness in love affairs or romantic connections. For Sun and Jupiter in the 6th, a lot of determination, a lot of strength. Mars is in the 4th aspects the seventh house, which will give fights or arguments with relationship partners. Again, don't trust friends. Friends are very fickle for this sign over the next year or so. For Sagittarius, Jupiter's in the fifth house, which is a good placement. But again, it's still aspected by Saturn. That won't go away for a while. And really, Sagittarius really won't be able to make a lot of progress until the end of the month. The other thing is we have Mars aspecting the sixth house for Sag. Venus is in the fourth house along with Mercury, so there'll be a lot of what I would call domestic disruption for this chart. So this is where we're seeing in the United States, which has a Sag rising, but and the actions of the United States could seem to be a little bit confused or addled or misdirected, but this will also be true of Sagittarius in general. So don't make any big moves, at least until the middle of the week. Don't make any big changes. For Capricorn, Mars and Saturn are in the second house, good for property acquisition, good for making deals connected with that. Venus is exalted in the third. Generally not a bad placement. I'm a little bit worried about Mercury being so close to Rahu and affecting business judgment. And Sun and Jupiter are in the fourth house. So that's actually not a bad placement. So it should be relatively good for money for this sign. Ketu and Moon in the ninth house. Generally not a bad placement. Ketu is the seventh house lord with the ninth house. So that's a Raj Yoga kind of a combination. So actually it will benefit Capricorn. For Aquarius, Saturn and Mars are in the first house. That's a Raj Yoga. It's also a Kendra Yoga because Mars rules the 10th house in the chart. So there'll be a lot of activity connected with work for the sign. Venus and Mercury are in the second house. There might be some unrealistic expectations about financial gain, but there will be some financial gain. Sun and Jupiter in the third. You'll probably have to watch out for overly ambitious projects. Ketu and Moon in the eighth, a lot of interest in exploring behind the scenes. Finally, for Pisces, Pisces has basically Venus and Mercury. This is a kind of a Raj Yoga for this sign because Venus is actually, even though it's not a good planet for Pisces because it's exalted in that sign, it becomes a good planet. And Mercury rules the fourth and the seventh house. So there can be good relationship opportunities, maybe relationships from the past showing up. As a matter of fact, that's one thing you'll notice. You'll hear a lot from people from the past over the next few weeks, just because of where Mercury is going. Also, there'll be communications which you thought had been resolved, which are not resolved. So I think one of the things to look at is we have this sign, temptation to change relationship partners or relationship partners will be acting a little bit unpredictable. But again, don't spend money in order to fix the problem, okay? Because it'll take care of itself within a couple of months. Now let's go on to the time and space chart. I think I have time for that. Yeah, let's blow it up a little bit. Yeah, that's great. It worked first time. All right, so the big action happening right now is Jupiter next to Hawaii. That's not really big action, but there's, it looks like heavy inflation to me in Hawaii because of Jupiter being aspected by Saturn. And that won't fix itself right away. So essentially prices will be at least just at a minimum stuck where they are over the next year or so. And there's a Saturn-Mars conjunction. So this really isn't affecting, Jupiter line really isn't affecting the West Coast all that much. But this Saturn and Mars line, and also this moon line is. And we'll have to watch out for violent action over Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, even into California. Um, I don't know how many of you heard about um, the person setting themselves on fire outside of New York, outside of the Trump courtroom, but the sun line is running close to that, and so that's a fire indicator. It's also giving some problems to the Dominican Republic. I'm going to get to these lines in a second, and also to um, Venezuela, uh, parts of Guyana, and even down into Brazil, Peru, and Chile and Argentina. There's going to be a lot of governmental um, enforcement in those regions. If I go back to this Rahu Mercury Venus line, we're going to get a lot of miscommunications from Canada, especially from Ottawa, and also there may be some violence in Western Canada, or not Western, but Central Canada, excuse me, and Mountain Area Canada, and also some potential for violence, for a lot of miscommunication between Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida, and down through Cuba and Guatemala, and touching on Peru and South America. This Jupiter line running through the Amazon and down into southern Brazil, that's interesting because Jupiter, this is essentially an inflation indicator just because of the way Jupiter is set up right now. Okay, so that's why I'm saying that. It's not because Jupiter is inherently an inflation indicator, but just Jupiter itself is afflicted right now. There's a Saturn line running through the Azores, and I believe it's the Canaries down there. And also there's a Moon and Mars line running through Iceland. So some more danger of volcanoes, some more danger of violence on the Ivory Coast. And also it'll touch England just a little bit, but not as prominently as it has before. There's a Mercury Venus Rahu line running through Central Europe. So a lot of those governments are facing like massive opposition. Poland has had farmers blocking roads from Ukraine crops. A lot of the Ukraine farms are being run by people from other countries, not by Ukrainians. So this has been something which has bothered Poland, or the Polish farmers at least. And it does look like there's some civil unrest in Central Europe, northern Italy, and down into northern Africa between Libya and Algeria, and down through here, down through Ghana and Gabon. And if we go over here, there's a sun line running up through Turkey and also through Egypt. And so you'll see some more aggressive government action in Turkey, Bulgaria, and even in the Ukraine. Okay. So the Jupiter line is running through Iran. Iran is going to be cocky and a little bit stupid, excuse my language, and that'll actually affect regions to the north and to a certain extent Syria. We have a Saturn line running through Pakistan and Afghanistan, and God, those places have been hit so badly over the past couple of years. And there's a Moon Mars line running through northern India and close to Pakistan. So I hope we don't see a border conflict in India. That's how I'm reading that. Over here we have Saturn, Mercury, and Venus all running through roughly. I have to fix that part of the world in my head. That's Myanmar, Thailand, a little bit into Cambodia, and even the sun line is affecting Japan and Vietnam and Hong Kong, and also Indonesia. So I think we're going to see more governmental control in this part of the world, more protests, but also more aggressive measures to put them down. If we go over to Japan, China, that also shows up in China, and we have Korea, which is right next to a Jupiter line, so there's some inflationary pressure in Korea. Definitely some in Japan, definitely some in Australia. And there's a Saturn line, which can indicate the Australian economy can be slowing down a little bit. And Mars and Moon line over here, which some potential for violence in New Zealand, but not a whole lot. This is sort of an energy shortage line, I think, over here, the Mars Moon line. So that's about it. The areas I would look carefully at over the next year over the next week, are this area right over here, close to India, or between India and China, and also India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan itself, and Ukraine, and large parts of Africa, because this region in Africa is in turmoil right now, mainly because of French, because of rebellion against French exploitation of the area. That's maybe the best way I can put it. And there's some aggressive action on the west coast of Africa too. In the United States, although there's some potential for aggression and maybe even some problems with Mexico, I'd focus more on this area right here, because this is kind of a disinformation center or a misinformation center. So you'll be hearing like a lot of lies coming out of there. So that's it for me for this week. As always, it's been a real pleasure for me. I hope you subscribe, like, and also share this page with your friends and with people who you think might be interested. And I love you all. Thank you so much for watching. Peace. I hope everyone's healthy, happy, and content. This is going to be a tough couple of months, but we'll get through it. Bye, everyone. See you next week.